This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome everyone to the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the United States and beyond. Throughout these fall months, we've had the privilege of conversing with some remarkable individuals. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. In this week's episode, we have an incredible guest. Originally from East Texas, but currently a park aide at Ginkgo Petrified Forest State Park in Washington State, his name is Larkin, and you can follow him on Instagram at LarkinInThePark509. Larkin shares his hiking and outdoor journey from his start in East Texas and the road trip that kicked off his passion for travel and the outdoors. We hear about his time in Colorado hiking 14ers, and most recently as a park aide in Eastern Washington. Lastly, we also hear about his experience exploring one of Colorado's lost national monuments. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Larkin. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm really excited to have our guest today. He's going to be sharing about all his adventures across the country and his most recent stay here in Washington State, being a park aide at a Washington State park that's very dear to my heart. Larkin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really excited to talk to you. For our listeners who haven't had a chance to follow you along on Instagram, can you share a little bit about yourself and how you got started hiking?
Yeah. So I grew up in East Texas, in a very rural area. They think we all live in tumbleweeds and it's all dusty, but where I live, it's more like the deep south. I lived about 30 miles east or west of the Louisiana border. So it's very lush, a lot of forests, a lot of pine trees. They call that area of Texas the Piney Woods. That's probably where my love for hiking and being outdoors started, even though at the time I didn't even realize it. So the house I grew up in, beyond the backyard was just woods. As a kid, we would play out in the woods, me, my brother, all the neighborhood kids, just out in the woods. We would roam around all day. I think that's where it started. Didn't realize I was into hiking until later in life. And that would have been probably 2009. I took a road trip with my friends. I had done a little traveling growing up, but not much. We used to go to Arkansas a lot as a family. And then when I was a young kid, we went to Colorado. In high school, I took a mission trip to Mexico and Puerto Rico, and we went to Tennessee as well. But it really started on this road trip I took with my friends. It all started because I had just watched all the seasons of X-Files, and I wanted to go to Roswell. I was like, I want to go to Roswell. And so I got my friends together because it was just in New Mexico. So, I mean, it wasn't terribly far. They were like, well, if we're going to go there, let's go see other stuff. I was like, okay, there's the Grand Canyon in the next state. And then from there, it was like, well, if we're going to the Grand Canyon, let's just go to California, go to the coast. I was like, okay. So we ended up going to San Diego. So we stopped at Roswell, of course, which was disappointing in my opinion. But it looks like it's gotten better since then. I've seen like more recent pictures. They've done a lot of additions since 15 years ago. We went to Carlsbad Caverns, Albuquerque. We went to Grand Canyon, the Meteor Crater, San Diego. And then we came back through Tucson and all that. I mean, it was so crazy to drive on I-40 and you cross into Arizona and it was just snow with the rock and we in Texas, we don't get a lot of snow. So it was just real magical. And it was such a great trip and a great moment. It kind of made me fall in love with like the West and the Southwest in general. And from there, I ended up moving to Tucson actually, like later that year. Just got up and moved there and did hiking there. And I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about some other trips and travels I've done, but that's kind of where hiking stemmed from, was able to flourish it, but it stemmed from being a kid just out in the woods in East Texas.
And I gotta ask, how would you describe the hiking scene in and around East Texas?
So East Texas, where I'm from, there's not a lot of public land. That's what I'm saying. Like growing up, it wasn't like, oh, hiking's a thing. It was just, you're just kind of roaming around these woods that are, I mean, I don't know who owns those woods behind the house, but they're definitely not public. Now, I did live in Austin for a little while, and that area has more of a hiking scene. I remember when I moved there, I bought a book before I moved. It was like the best hikes in Austin, San Antonio. And yeah, I was doing a lot of hiking around there. When I first bought my first camel pack, I was hiking with a buddy of mine, and it was just supposed to be like this short little hike. I don't even remember what. It was just some park around Austin. Basically, I think we got lost or got off trail or something. But this was in the summer too, so we just had like a water bottle each, and then drank all that. Didn't have any more water. We're just sweating. Like, man, we really need some water. And it's so crazy because there was a water tower. We're right by a water tower. Like, there's all that water in there, and we can't even get to it. We eventually was able to make it back down to the park. They had a water fountain, and like right after that, we went to Walmart and bought like a backpack with a camel bag. But yeah, that area of around Austin has a pretty good hiking scene for sure. But East Texas, it's just not and a lot of people in that area, at least where I'm from, just aren't really even interested in hiking. It's just not something that people aren't as active there. But there are some great places to go around there. There's one place, there's a state park there called Caddo Lake State Park. It's actually the only natural lake in Texas. It borders Texas and Louisiana. And it's great. It's maybe more good for kayakers, like if you like kayaking, canoeing, boating, that kind of thing. But it's actually like that cypress swamp with the Spanish moss. It's got that whole look to it. It's a great place.
For our listeners, there's a special nickname for that area because East Texas kind of borders, 3 or 4 states?
Yeah, okay. You're familiar with that. Yeah, so it's called the Arklatex. And it's where Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas meet. And they call that region, I forget how many counties, or kind of make it up. Oklahoma's in there too, but I guess it doesn't really sound as great. It doesn't have that flow to it if you add Oklahoma into that bunch.
Oh, man. Yeah, I've heard really great things about Austin. Our former guest on the podcast last year, Justice from Connect and Hike. He has an amazing hiking club out there in Austin. And from what I've been able to see, it looks like it's a growing hiking scene there in Austin, Texas. One thing I did want to go back to, Larkin, that you mentioned is I got a chance to go to Roswell, what's that, like maybe 2 years ago on the way to White Sands. And I got to say, I was disappointed too. Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting the commercialization of everything. We ended up only staying like a few hours and then continued on to White Sands.
In 2009, it didn't even seem like they were doing that. I remember the museum. I thought it was like a high school science fair. That's what it kind of reminded me of. I've had friends that have gone in more recent years, and it seems like there's a little more stuff that looks a little more interesting. I'd love to go back. New Mexico is probably one of my top states that I'd like to explore more of. I've done a lot of exploration in the northern part of it, but I'd like to explore more of the southern part.
Yeah, I am constantly being surprised on the biodiversity there in New Mexico. Like, I think a lot of people picture the desert, but there's mountains, there's forests, there's sand dunes. New Mexico really has it all. Even hot springs, I hear. If folks haven't put New Mexico on the bucket list, they definitely should. Now, Larkin, we're recording this almost at the tail end of summer. We got a couple weeks left before it officially becomes fall. How's your summer hiking season here in Washington State in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, it's been great. Last summer, I was in the coastal North Carolina. There's not as much hiking there, though I did get into kayaking, though, so I'm kind of a big fan of kayaking now. But moving out here, I moved here in May, just the very, even before the summer officially started, I guess. And I hit the ground running. I knew I wanted to do this, and this, had a whole list. So like every weekend, I'd be going out and hiking different places. I've explored the eastern part. I've been to the western part, the peninsula, went into like northern Oregon. I want to see everything, and all my free time, that's what I'm going to do.
And yeah, and that's one thing that caught my attention is you were showcasing Eastern Washington a lot. and I was just like, oh, I've been there. That's the Wild Horse Monument off I-90 by the gorge. And just the different places you hit up, like you said, you hit the ground running and hit a lot of the great state parks here in Eastern Washington and just the recreational areas. Now, before we dive into you being a parkade here in Washington State, you've been able to travel and spend time in some remarkable places. Can you share a little bit about your journey prior to coming to Washington State?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of give like a history. I've moved around a lot. So I lived in Tucson, Arizona for a little while. Loved it. I've lived in several different spots in Texas. I mentioned Austin, East Texas. I lived a little north of Dallas. I lived out in Abilene, out in West Texas. I lived in northern Louisiana a couple of times. For the longest time, I was in Colorado. I was in Colorado for 7 years, from 2014 to 2021. So I spent a lot of time in Colorado. Same thing. Like, I moved there and I just did everything. A lot of friends I had there that were locals, like, man, you've seen more than I have. And I've lived here my whole life, you know? But I'd go into Colorado. I spent a lot of time in Utah, which is my favorite. So my main squeeze I got into was looking for petroglyphs and ruins. I remember my first petroglyph I saw was actually at Bandelier National Monument in New Mexico. And then I got more into it once I went to Chaco in New Mexico. I kind of got in some groups because a lot of that scene is very hush hush due to like vandalism and whatnot. But Utah, southern Utah, is my favorite place. And I would go there a few times a year from Colorado, stay, a few days. I did a lot of off-trail hiking. To find the ruins and stuff, you would need GPS coordinates. So I did a lot of that. And then recently before moving here to Washington, I was in North Carolina, and I was like near the coast. I was near the ocean. It was just different. But I love the ocean. I am more of a mountain desert guy, I think. I'm more of like an earth element. The ocean was great. The beach was great. But I actually had an opportunity to work at an Oregon State Park on the coast, but I decided I just wanted something different than the ocean. So I did and I'm in Washington instead of the Oregon one that I had an opportunity to go to.
I got to ask, because you've been able to travel not just to live, but to road trip, like you mentioned, across a lot of states. Are you keeping tabs on how many states you've been able to cross off the list?
Absolutely. So yeah, that first road trip I was telling you about that I went to in 2009, ever since then, I've had the goal to go all 50 states. Right now I'm at 41. I hit two new states. First two new states I've been to since 2017, which was actually Washington. I went to Indiana and Michigan. That was during the eclipse. I saw the full eclipse back in, when was it? I think it was 2017, I think was the last one. But I went to in Wyoming, and it was just such a magical experience. I was like, I had already knew there was going to be another one, and in 2024. So I saw the closest place for me to see it in North Carolina was going to be like Ohio, Indiana. So I actually ended up going to Indiana and Ohio, and I went up to Michigan too, just to kind of cross it off the list to see that. So I had that goal of going to all 50 states since 2009. And I feel like I could have done it already if that was like my main agenda. But when I moved to Colorado in 2014, I was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to explore here. There's no need to go to Indiana when I'm in Colorado. So I feel like I'll get to it eventually. Like, so now I just need New York and above, like those New England states, and then Alaska, Hawaii. That's the only states I have left. But yeah, that's definitely a goal of mine, is to go to all 50 states. I know a lot of people are kind of into that. That's a fun fact that I learned about recently. If you want to do all 50 states, it's kind of cool to do North Dakota last, because they have a visitor center. I think they have in Fargo. You save the best for last, 50th state or something. You can take a picture by it. I think you get a shirt. I didn't know about that. I was like, yeah, I should have saved North Dakota for last.
That's pretty
That's just
cool.
a heads up to anyone wanting that goal. Like, if you're going to do it, might as well just save North Dakota for last.
That's a good thing to know. Now, on all these visits and adventures you've been able to go, you tend to gravitate to not just well-known places, but you like to go off trail, visit places that might not be frequently trekked. In your opinion, what are some destinations or parks that you've had a chance to visit that might be flying under the radar, but are still worth the visit?
Let me see. So many places I've been, some ones that aren't as well known. So a lot of the places I've been that aren't well known aren't exactly parks, though. That's the thing.
Oh, you can give
Um,
regions.
Well, one of my favorite regions that's like one big playground to me is southern Utah. And a lot of that land is Bureau of Land Management. If you just go down some canyon there, you won't even see anybody. You kind of get away from the crowds that are going to be at Moab, at Arches and Canyonlands. They can get pretty congested there. But if you go out, I go down to San Juan County and just kind of get away from it all. I love the national parks. When I like to hike, I kind of like more solitude. And so just to kind of get away from people, that's where I would go. Because I think pretty much all the national parks I've been to have been relatively busy, except for, not that I think it was the greatest park I've ever been to. I went to, I believe it's pronounced Congaree National Park. It's in South Carolina. It's more of like a swampy area, but they have you can hike on these boardwalks. That was probably the least amount of people I've seen at a national park.
On the flip side, has there been popular destinations that kind of lived up to the hype when you got a chance to visit them?
Well, oh yeah, absolutely. I've learned that in Washington too. Not even national parks, but certain trails and hikes, they're real popular. I can see why they're popular. Yeah, one place I keep going back to here that's in your neck of the woods even is Mount Rainier. Great spot. I always start my hike at sunrise, whether that's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. So I kind of beat the crowd. I start early all the time. And I know Mount Rainier is it's just a beautiful mountain, a beautiful park. You just kind of got to know when to go, if you start early like me, it'll be fine. And also during the week, that's pretty much just like a given. There's a reason why some places are popular. They're definitely beautiful spots.
No, for sure. You get there before, 7 a.m.? You can get in there without the permit to Mount Rainier, but
yeah, that's what I did every time.
Yeah, you get there early enough, you'll beat the crowds for sure. Now, one place that really caught my attention on your feed, Larkin, that I didn't even know about, but instantly once I saw your reel, it caught my attention. And it's about a specific national monument that you've been able to explore that has a unique backstory, and that's Wheeler Geological Area, otherwise known as Colorado's Lost National Monument. Can you share a little bit about the area and its backstory, along with how your visit was?
Yeah, I've actually visited that quite a few years ago now. That was back in 2015. I moved to Colorado in summer of 2014, so I hadn't been there terribly long yet before I found out about that place. I'm not even sure how I found out about it. I think it was just from the internet. It just kind of popped up at me, some kind of list of things to see in Colorado. Yeah, so it does have a very interesting history, as it's no longer a national monument, but it was a national monument. Can't give you the exact dates, but it was established as a national monument and it was decommissioned as a national monument because no one was visiting. It's kind of like in a very remote region of the state. They never developed any roads or anything to get to it. So to get there, you can do a 15-mile rough Jeep road. And I think if you saw on the reel, there was a Jeep that was almost on its side. That wasn't my Jeep, by the way. I actually hiked in, and it's a 14-mile round trip hike. And I remember at the time, that was my longest hike I'd done at that time. I remember when I first moved to Colorado, I remember seeing this one hike that I wanted to do that was 7 miles. In my head, I was like, I want to do that, but I can't hike. That's too far. Because I don't even know. I was probably hiking just 3-4 mile hikes, 5 mile max, And now I'm able, 7 miles, that ain't nothing, 14 miles ain't nothing. I did 14 miles last week at Kendall's Catwalk, I think I did it in 5-6 hours. You just build up. But I do remember specifically that hike at Wheeler was my first, I guess you would say, longest hike I'd done at that time. And it was 14 miles. I remember at the time there was a lot of flowers in bloom, and there was some nice forest with some meadows. There was a lot of trees though that were, I guess, eaten by those beetles. I remember that there was a Jeep that was on its side, and then you come up to the actual formation, and it's almost like something out of Utah. It's got these pointed spire rocks. It's just a very unique formation there. It's not very well known about. I don't even know that they decommissioned the national monuments, but apparently they do.
Yeah, you kind of sent me down a rabbit hole after the reel, and I want to say it was established as a national monument in the early 1900s, I think 1909. Within a few short years, it was one of the least visited national monuments in the country. And what got my attention was your reel showing those spires. They reminded me of the hoodoos at Bryce, but they're darker color. They're darker shades. And I was like, where is that? And then your reel tells a story about it, and instantly added it to the list. Do you know if you still have to either travel that Jeep road or hike in?
Yeah, I actually looked recently. I saw that that's still the only two options. That's one of those hidden gems you were talking about earlier, I guess, that if you want to get away from the crowds, there you go.
You just got to commit to a 14 miler, though, right?
I tried to look that up on AllTrails, but I couldn't even find the trail on there. As far as I remember, it was mostly flat. It was more of like a flat hike rather than you're not going up a mountain or anything. So I do remember that. I don't remember it being too bad.
Sticking with the Colorado theme, another thing that you've been able to do, like you said, when you were in Colorado, you hit the ground running and you got to see a lot of the state. And you got to cross off quite a few of the 14ers in Colorado. How did that kind of come about, and what's your current tally at?
Yeah, so for your audience that may not know, 14er, it's just a mountain that's above 14,000 feet. I think there's only 3 or 4 states, if you count Alaska, that have 14ers in the U.S. Washington having Mount Rainier. California has a few, and then Colorado has the most. It has 58 peaks above 14,000 feet. And like same thing, like I didn't even know about it when I moved there. Before I moved there, I just kind of found out about it online, and I was like, I gotta do it, And I remember my first one I did was Mount Bierstadt, and that's actually one of the more popular ones to be your first because it's just an easier one as far as even accessibility, and the hike itself, it's a shorter hike because you start at, like we were talking before we started recording, like you start at like 12,000 feet or something, like Guanella Pass. So I started doing that one, and that was summer of 2015, and I'd only do them in the summer. Any of the mountain hike in Colorado, I was summertime hiking. Wintertime, I'd take it a little more easier, go to Utah or somewhere in the desert, So I ended up doing 42. Yeah, 42. My time there. I love to say I'm going to finish them all. I have 16 more. We'll see if that happens. Hopefully have a lot of years ahead of me that I hopefully can get back over there and finish them off. The ones that I have left are some of the more difficult ones. They're going to be class 4 that are like the no fall zones, a little more exposed, like scrambling and all that. And then some of them, you have to backpack in. I'd like to finish them all. Some of them, every time that I'd hike them, you'd be hiking and they're pretty rough. You just be like, why am I doing this? And then when you finish, you're like, oh man, I can't wait to do the next one next week.
Now, the last question I want to ask you before we jump into you being here in Washington as a park aide is you've mentioned a couple national parks that you've been able to visit. Is that something you're also kind of keeping tally of? And I'm always curious to hear the national park story of our guests. Do you remember the first park you visited, and what was the last park that you visited?
I think that's probably more of a recent goal I've had because now that I've been to so many, I'm like, hey, I could probably finish them at some point. I don't think I started out kind of like with the states. I kind of took that trip and I was like, I want to go to all 50. Maybe the last few years I've decided like, hey, I could do these national parks. And I think right now I'm at 43 and out of 63, I think. The first one I went to would have been when I was a kid, and it was Hot Springs National Park. We didn't live terribly far. Like I said, the Arklatex, that's where we would vacation, was Arkansas. And Hot Springs National Park would have been the first one. The last one I've been to is actually one here in Washington that I wasn't able to cross off the list when I visited in 2017, was North Cascades. And I've gone there twice now this summer. So that was the last one I was able to cross off, a brand new one. So that was really cool to get to do.
Now, right now, you're a park aide in Washington State Park System at one of my favorite state parks to visit in all seasons, and that's Ginkgo Petrified State Park near Vantage on the Columbia. I've seen the advertisements over the last 2 years. I feel like the state park system is really trying to get park aides to come and help out at the state parks. How did that opportunity kind of come about, and what's your work routine like as a park aide?
So when I was in North Carolina, I was volunteering for the National Forest there. They have a Croatan National Forest, and they weren't hiring seasonal workers at that time due to budget reasons, and was able to find a list of parks of different agencies like the national parks, all that. Somehow Washington State Park was on the list. I just clicked it. I applied to a bunch, and honestly, at the time, I didn't even think I would hear anything back. I was just trying to take a different career move because I love the outdoors, and I was like, that would fit me. I was working construction at the time in North Carolina, but just wasn't really liking it. I actually got a call back. I was able to find one because not all of them have housing. So that was, being out of state, I knew that was a requirement. So not all of them do have housing. And I applied in Oregon and I applied in California to different state parks. But anyway, I ended up accepting the Ginkgo in Washington, and I was able to come here. I think out of the different regions, I have told myself before that Washington and Pacific Northwest region was an area that I wanted to explore more of. I had only been here one other time, and I knew there was a lot of stuff to do here as far as hiking and nature. So that was definitely a neat opportunity to get to see more of this beautiful state.
Larkin, for your day-to-day tasks, are you primarily in the visitor center or do you go out onto the trails?
My routine is I do a campground check in the morning, just make sure everyone's where they're supposed to be and paid up and everything. And then from there, you do the bathroom cleaning, so janitorial duties. And then with me specifically, I'm more hired for the maintenance side. So I do the landscaping, mowing, weed eating, minor repairs, stuff like that. And then we have, just the entrance booth. I'll work that occasionally, answering calls, kind of do it all, Not a lot of hiking, though I know my campground check. So every morning I do walk a mile. I clocked it to see like how far it was. So I do that. And then I am on my feet a lot. We do have just gators to ride around in, but I, do a lot of walking. Like, oh yeah, I pick up litter and everything like that. But yeah, just kind of do everything you can to keep the park clean, green, and seen is what they want at the Washington State Parks.
I got to ask because I think a lot of people, especially visitors to Washington State, when they hear Washington State, they think of the lush green forest, the mountains of the Cascades. But you're on the other side of the Cascades in eastern Washington, which for people that haven't had a chance to visit, it's a high desert. It reminds me more of Flagstaff, Arizona than what you would stereotypically think of the Pacific Northwest. Did you kind of have an idea of the landscape that Eastern Washington had, or was it something that was new when you moved?
I wish it was like Flagstaff, Arizona, where I'm at, but we don't have enough trees.
Petrified.
Right. No, so in 2017 on my visit here, I actually came to Ginkgo because they have the petroglyphs by the museum. And since I'm kind of a petroglyph hound, like I made sure when I was in Washington, I saw like Mount Rainier and went to the peninsula. But yeah, I actually came to Ginkgo. So I kind of knew already what it looked like here because I had visited. Yeah, it's definitely like, I think Yakima probably has more like pine trees, like Ponderosa there. But here, you don't have a lot of trees. So when you hike around Ginkgo, it's sagebrush. So when you hike here, especially in the summer, you're not going to have any shade. I kind of feel like here it's more with the sage, kind of reminds me of Utah, some of the canyons, just a different color. It's not as red. It's more like the basalt. So it's kind of like the black, dark brown. And then you have like just this yellow grass, sheet grass, I think they call it here. It just stays yellow all year round.
No, that's a good way of describing it because especially across the river, Echo Basin and Frenchman Coulee look more like something out of Utah than Washington. And I think that's why I really loved your feed is you ended up showing some of the more unique places. One of them being Wild Horse Monument right there off I-90 next to the gorge, which you kind of see it as soon as you cross the Vantage Bridge. Outside of Washington, you've had a chance to explore a lot of the Pacific Northwest, including Oregon and Idaho. What have been some other memorable outdoor experiences here in the PNW?
I think my favorite part of Washington has been down like in the southern part, like Klickitat County, around like Mount St. Helens. I really dug that area because it's just feel like when I've gone, at least there wasn't as many people. You still had like a lot of stuff there to do. I feel like you had Mount St. Helens. There's a lot of waterfalls. You're not far if you want to cross the Columbia into Oregon. There they have Multnomah Falls. Plus all those waterfalls along the Columbia, there's tons of them. That area has been really, as far as like the summer's gone, I think is my favorite part of the Pacific Northwest is kind of like that Columbia River Gorge area, Klickitat County, and Mount St. Helens.
The gorge, I mean, every season it's gorgeous. If you're a waterfall lover, you can literally drive 10 miles and see 10 different waterfalls right alongside the highways on either side of Washington or Oregon. And yeah, Klickitat County's been on my radar recently. I don't know if you've had a chance to visit or have heard of the ice caves there near Mount Adams. There's a couple lava tubes down there that are still kind of accessible to the public.
I actually went to them.
Oh, did you go to the cheese one? Because that's the one that's on my list to explore this winter.
The which one?
The cheese cave, they call it.
It was called like the Guler. Yeah, I went there. It was really cool. I actually liked it better than because I went to Ape Cave. And if you're into caves, it's so funny. I'm not even a cave person, but for some reason in the last year, I've been to so many caves because last November I was in Arizona, went to Coronado National Memorial. They have this big cave that you can explore. It's a pretty decent sized cave. You can just go in by yourself with a headlamp. I went there and that was cool. I get kind of freaked out, honestly. And then when I was in Ohio in April, I went to this other cave I don't know what they call it now, but it's like the Appalachian Forest Museum. They have a cave that's more of there's parts where you kind of have to squeeze through some areas. I went there and then I went to the Ape Cave and I don't know, I just wasn't impressed. I'd rather see like more scenery there. You're kind of just in this dark enclosure. But the Ice Cave was really cool because you had these like ice, basically like your stalactites, stalagmites, but they were just out of ice. And that was really cool to see. So I went there in July. So it's hot, muggy outside. But once you get close to the entrance, like it's basically like a hole in the ground, you just feel this icy, like this air hit you before you even go inside. And that was really cool to experience.
Now, Larkin, we like to do a segment here on the podcast where we do a deep dive into our guest's Instagram and we ask them about a post or a location that captured our attention. And on your IG feed, it's sprinkled with some great roadside attractions. And for me, who I love to road trip and I love stopping at some of these weird roadside attractions, I got to ask, what have been some of the standouts throughout your travels across the country?
So one thing I'm interested in besides like hiking and everything is like cryptid like stuff. So it'd be like your Bigfoot and whatnot. And West Virginia has got a lot of cool like little roadside attractions. Some people may know, I think one of the more famous is the Mothman statue in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They have a full size, it's like 6-7 feet tall Mothman statue right there in the middle of town. There's another place in West Virginia, lesser known cryptid called the Flatwoods Monster. You have to look it up to kind of see what it looks like. It's more of like a robotic alien shape, but they have a whole museum dedicated to it. The Flatwoods Monster Museum. And around that area, that town, they have, I think it's 4 or 5 these big chairs, kind of like your Adirondack chairs, but they're carved and painted to look like the Flatwoods Monster. And they have different, and you can like take your photo by like in the chairs, and they have them all, several ones all around that area. And then there's another place in Arkansas, in Falk, Arkansas, which is just a short drive from Texarkana, and it's called the Monster Mart. And it's a convenience store that's also kind of like its own museum dedicated to the Falk Monster, or the Boggy Creek Monster, as some know. And it's got a lot of memorabilia from their movie, came out in the 70s, The Legend of Boggy Creek. And it was kind of like a hit at the drive-in theaters back in the 70s. And it was made by a local man from Texarkana that made it. You just have to look it up because the building it's like Monster Mart, and it's like a big carving of Bigfoot, like its face. And then there's a smaller carving that's about 7 feet tall on the wall outside of the store, plus a mural. It's a very unique place, especially being where it's located, because it's located just in a very one red light town kind of place for that to be there. And then in Washington, I went to a place near Index. They have a life-size statue of Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. It's actually like a coffee shop now. I want to say it's called like the Chalet Cafe or something, but it's actually one of the original filming locations of Harry and the Hendersons, where they had in the movie, they had it where it's like a museum dedicated to the Bigfoot. So in that filming location, they have this little coffee stand there, and they have a statue of Bigfoot. And then one of the buildings, they have the museum's name from the movie on it. It's not actually a museum, it's just there for, aesthetics. But that was cool to see here in Washington. As far as like, I was like, I have to see it because I love that stuff. So as far as like roadside attractions go, just that anything like the cryptid, Bigfoot, that kind of thing, I'd love to see.
I'm going to have to add that stop my next time going through Index, because I didn't know about that. That's pretty cool.
It's right off Highway 2. You can't miss it. They have another statue in that place. It's Bigfoot. He's holding a surfboard.
Have you made it out to Long Beach, Washington yet?
No, I haven't.
It's a small little oceanside town closer to the Oregon, basically the mouth of the Columbia. They have a cryptid called Jake the Alligator Boy, and you might see stickers on people's bumpers from time to time, but they have this supposed mummy of an alligator boy.
Okay, I think I've heard of it now that you've mentioned it. I bought it's It's kind of an older book now, but The Weird Washington.
That's a great book. I have it. Now, these last three questions, Larkin, are questions we like to ask all our guests. The first one is, when it comes to summiting or an end of the hike, is there something that you regularly do? For some, it's packing a favorite snack. For others, it's a drink or a moment of zen. And for a lot of us, it's looking forward to the meal afterwards. Is there a regular customer routine that you like to do when you reach your destination or when you make it back out?
I guess I do have somewhat of a routine, but it's probably not super unique. You got to get up to the summit, get your photos, and I just sit there and snack on mixed nuts or something. Honestly, that's probably the only time I really stop and rest on a hike. I kind of just go full throttle the whole way and then rest when I get to the top. Just kind of like, look around, soak it in, just enjoy the view, get a little nourishment, and then hike back down.
Now, this next one is more about your pack list. Is there a luxury item that you tend to pack that falls outside of the essentials list?
No, I pack pretty light, so I don't bring anything really extra. I don't really have anything for you on that one.
And then the last one is, we're at the tail end of summer. We only got a few more months before the end of 2024. But is there any travel or hiking goals for the remainder of the year? Or maybe 2025?
Yeah, actually, next week I'm driving to Vegas. I'm going from Vegas to like Page. So just that area between those two, like the southern Utah and the Arizona Strip area above the Grand Canyon, like that area. I got different things there. Page, you got Antelope Canyon. And then on the way back to Washington, I'm going to be stopping at Great Basin National Park. I've been to that area a few times, so I'm going to be hitting up maybe some of the same places, but then, a lot of new places too that I've looked up to visit as well. I definitely love the desert, and it's been too long since I've been, so can't wait to go back.
Well, that was it for the regular questions, Larkin. This last section of the podcast is the this or that questions. I'm going to read you 10 hiking related topics, and you just choose which one you prefer out of the two. But the first one is, do you prefer hiking in the summer or in the fall?
I'm going to say the fall. I feel like you can hike the same hikes you can in the summer, that you can still hike them in the fall. But in the fall, it's cooler. I love when the leaves change. I always did that in Colorado. You only have like a 2-week window when the aspens are in their peak, to see those change. And I'd always make sure to go hike and make sure to see the aspens, just to see those vibrant colors.
This next one, Larkin, is a tough one, but waterfalls or summits?
It is a tough one for sure. I'm going to probably go with summit a little more. I do enjoy my waterfalls.
And this next one's a trail system question, but switchbacks or straight up?
No switchbacks. No contest on that one.
And then, do you rock trekking poles or do you prefer to be freehand?
I've only done free-handed. I'm interested in trekking poles. I've never used them, but I've been reading more about them and seeing the benefits to them with my knees and everything. So recently I started not using a trekking pole, but I got a walking stick, and I got it because here in Eastern Washington, at least when I first got here in May, a ton of rattlesnakes. So I got like a walking stick just when I hiked here in the eastern part, just to kind of have that in front of me. And then I started taking it recently on more like the mountain hikes. I feel like it's definitely helped. And I'm looking forward to, in the near future, I'm going to be trying out some trekking poles just to see if I like them better. But at the moment, I've always hiked freehand or with a walking stick.
This next one, Larkin, is about your footwear. Do you prefer trail runners or traditional hiking boots?
I've been sticking with boots. Been in Colorado 2014. I've used Columbia as the brand that I've been sticking with. I'm sure there's probably better ones out there. I don't know. They all work for me. I just order them online. Never had a problem with sizing. A size 12, just boom, they fit perfect. I just bought a new pair actually. Since I've been here this summer, I bought a new pair. Instead of trying something new, I just know that they work for me. And so I've just kind of stuck with that brand, and it's always been just the traditional boot. But I definitely have to go with waterproof, they have to be waterproof because I do so many stream crossings and everything.
And then this next one is another trail system question. But do you prefer a loop trail or an out and back trail?
I think it probably depends on the trail. Most of the hikes I do are out and back. I did that hike at Mount Rainier. Skyline, Skyline. Yeah, I did that one in July, and that's a great loop. It was a great hike for sure. But most hikes I do are out and back, and I'll probably just prefer doing that. I know with the out and back, so you go up, and it's I always just think of okay, if I make it this far up, on the way down is nothing. I just turn my brain off and just go down, that's the easy part, is you just got to make it up.
Now, this next one's a new one for season 8. When it comes to not so nice conditions, if you had to choose, would you choose a muddy trail or a rocky trail?
I'd probably choose a rocky trail. I think most of the trails I do are rocky anyway. Muddy trails, I mean, I've done a few of those, but, I don't like to make a mess.
And I think I know the answer to this next one, but sunset hikes or sunrise hikes?
Probably done more sunrise hikes, I would say. But I probably prefer more sunset hikes. I'll get up early, but I'm not saying I'm a fan of it.
Now, this next one is probably our toughest one, but spring wildflowers or fall colors?
Fall colors for me, but Washington does have some beautiful spring blooms. I got to see a lot of those in May and June when I was here, hiking still. But I'm definitely more of a fall color vibe. If you have any suggestions on any fall hikes here, because I know a lot of the trees here are more your evergreens, but I'm looking forward to fall for sure.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question, is if you were going to be around for fall. So here we don't have big pockets of fall colors, but the big thing that happens in the mountains is the larches turn. So the conifers that turn into a golden color and then they drop their needles. And it's become so popular in Washington over the last couple of years. They call it Larch Madness because some of these trails that you might not have seen, crowds at suddenly become busy because people are trying to capture larches now. The higher elevation ones, like especially around North Cascades, the larches aren't too big in the alpine, but they give some beautiful colors. But here in the Central Cascades, we have western larches, so they're the big cousins. So taller trees, but still turn that golden color in the fall, and it's great to see them kind of sprinkled in amongst the other evergreens.
Well, looking forward to that then. I'll still be here in the fall for sure.
And then the last one, Larkin, is do you prefer a steep climb or would you rather go long distance?
I'd rather go a little longer if it's not as steep for sure. I've done too many steep hikes here where it was really rough on the knees. I'll definitely go some extra miles just to, kind of have more of a gradual incline.
Well, that was it for the this or that questions, Larkin. For our listeners that haven't had a chance to follow you on social media and your adventures, what are some of the best places either on Instagram or online that they can follow you at?
Just on Instagram, the handle is Lark in the Park 509.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to link that in the episode show notes so people can check it out. Larkin, it's been awesome talking to you. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Your feed has been a real inspiration and it's getting me motivated to start exploring Eastern Washington as the temperatures cool down. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
I appreciate you and thank you for the opportunity.
And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Larkin. We extend a heartfelt thanks to him for coming on the podcast. Make sure to follow his adventures on Instagram at LarkinInThePark509. Also, don't forget to check out the episode show notes for more. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the fall months, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday, with occasional bonus episodes on Fridays. To ensure that you never miss out on those thrilling tales, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to join our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mics. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. Hey everyone, hope you've all been enjoying the trails this summer. I gotta be honest, leading group hikes is a blast, but capturing all the amazing memories can be a challenge. That's where our new podcast sponsor, the Cameo Journal, comes in. This thing's built for travelers and hikers by fellow adventurers. It's a pocket-sized rugged journal designed for you to collect up to 100 entries from all your trailmates, your life guests, and anyone else you meet along the way. Basically, it can be a guest book for your travels and an awesome keepsake. Logan over at the Cameo Journal is a backpacker himself and put all his love for travel into the design. So if you're looking to level up your hiking adventures, head over to thecameojournal.com to grab one not just for yourself, but for your crew too.